Pues buenas tardes, noches a todos y todas. Estamos ahora mismo con nuestro último ponente, desgraciadamente para este día y esta segunda edición de la Conf Madrid. John Cutler está conectado desde Estados Unidos con nosotros. Habéis podido disfrutar de una mesa redonda apasionante sobre todos los puentes y analogías que podíamos crear entre el mundo de indie rock y el mundo de producto digital. Y voy a pasar en inglés ahora mismo para introducir a John. Solo robar un segundo para dar la enhorabuena a todo el equipo de organización del evento, Sara Santiago, Laura Bernard, Eduard Jiménez, Pablo Gil y Allessandro Pintaudi. Habéis hecho un trabajo espectacular y hemos recibido muchísimos mensajes a lo largo del día y nos da la vida a recibir todos estos mensajes de soporte. Now, introducing John on stage for this closing keynote. I think that John Cutler needs no introduction, to be honest. He's been working during years and years in different roles, among them product manager's position in companies such as Zendesk and Pendo. Now he's working, he joined a few years ago, if I'm not saying anything wrong, John. He joined Amplitude team. They are passionate product managers and product professionals. And John is now leading all the research and education at Amplitude. So he's going to deliver a keynote talk tonight, in like 40 minutes. And he will share with us what it takes to move from an all kind of companies to a product-led companies. The pains and gains and what it takes this journey based on his own experience and what he's currently seeing and coaching with Amplitude clients. So, John, please have a great time. Thanks again for trusting in this event. So, enjoy.
Great. Good evening, I guess. First, this has been a really rough year, and I wanted to extend a huge thank you to the organizers of La Conf Madrid, Nicholas, Sarah, Allessandro, and the rest of the team. I am truly honored to be here with you today. It's been a rough year, right? So a little bit about me, I'll just give you that summary again. I have a background in product management, UX research, some startups. I live in California, in Southern California, north of Los Angeles. I do write a lot about product, and I do use Twitter a lot. And as a parent, Twitter is a good way to get in touch with me because we have a baby. And so you have to spend your time thinking about the baby. So for the last couple years, I have worked at mostly business-to-business software as a service companies. Mentioned some Appfolio, Pendo, Zendesk, and now Amplitude, where I head up customer education. Now, the job at Amplitude is really a dream job, because I'm this product nerd. I love chatting with people. I love this stuff. And I get to have so much fun teaching and coaching teams from many different types of companies, big, small, in between. Very briefly about Amplitude, we help teams be more data informed, have more impact. And the reason why I really love it is a big part of my mission is empowering these cross-functional teams and helping companies be more product-led, which is what we're going to talk about today. So it's a topic I'm really passionate about. Now, just to get serious for a second, when your customers are product teams from around the world, you get a very unique perspective on world events. And I have to say that the last couple months have been so challenging and so fast moving. And talking to teams has given me this real appreciation for just how quickly things are changing. From teams that experienced like 400% month-over-month growth. That's crazy. To 90% loss of business in other businesses. That is amazing if you think about it. Huge shifts in business focus and product strategies. There's whole channels have evaporated to nowhere. And the mix is incredible, right? People getting the job of their career, their dream job, because now they can work remote, to maybe people losing their job at the worst possible moment. So things are happening at an incredible pace. And with that, there is also an incredible amount of pressure on teams. And for teams and companies, this whole thing has been an opportunity and, of course, a huge challenge. And in fact, what I'm observing is that some teams are finally making that big positive change. They put the foundation in place for many years, and actually the pandemic was the catalyst. So an example here was a team, and actually a team working in government in Northern Europe. And so for a couple years, the leaders had been working at improving cross-functional collaboration, years. And it was very hard to get that going. But they did that work and they created that foundation. And now fast forward to March and April, they have designers and developers and lawyers, yes, lawyers, on a Zoom call together, developing software and releasing software to the public. And right when the law is being written in real time, and that's incredible. So the way the leader there described it, if someone had told me 3 years ago that I would have thought that you were joking that this would be possible. Now, the sad thing is that there are other teams that are struggling. And what you're seeing is that their old decisions are holding them back from adapting quickly to this new reality. And so what I'm seeing here are companies that before the pandemic hadn't really figured out how to adapt their roadmap fluidly. They would load up teams to 100%. They do very careful estimates and careful commitments. And the teams would leave no room for slack, no room for flow, no room for mental health. And maybe the companies hadn't worked before the pandemic to tame technical debt or UX debt. So what happened to those companies in March, suddenly they were shipping like crazy for some reason. They're very productive, but this has caught up with them now a couple months later. So what I'm going to do for this particular talk. So one thing is for certain, that in this complex environment, product-led organizations have an advantage. They have many more options to survive and thrive, which really leads me to the goal of this particular talk. So first, I'm going to dispel some of the confusion around the term product-led. Then I'm going to talk about the product-led journey, and it's a journey, obviously no endpoint, and we're going to talk about the bumps along the way. We're going to talk about common traps. And then we're going to end with some common tips to maybe nudge your organization. I can't guarantee these tips will work, but at least they're a place to start. So let's get started. What does it mean to be product-led? Let's start with all the wrong answers. Wrong answers first. It means product manager-led. No, it does not. It means you stop selling and marketing. No, it does not. Ask any salesperson or marketer whether they'd rather sell or market a great product or a crap product. They will tell you it matters. It means you sell a digital product, not necessarily. I mentioned this government service. It means you don't care about design or engineering. Absolutely not. You aren't customer-centric, design-centric. All you care about is the product. No, everything goes hand in hand. What it means is that your organization sees design and technology as drivers for sustainable growth. Not just linear incremental growth, rather to enable step changes, new opportunities, new directions, new businesses, innovation, and disruption. So being product-led is the belief in the creativity and potential of cross-functional product teams to help their companies grow. And it's a journey, right? You never done. You don't magically flip the switch. So I'm sure you're sitting there and saying, like, you've heard all this before, you're familiar, John, that's not a new idea. Companies everywhere are trying to make this shift. Quick, hire product managers, quick, have small teams, try to work like, Spotify or something. And frankly, in some big organizations, it's out of control, right? You have products everywhere, product owners everywhere, product managers, product owner managers, product manager managers, product portfolio managers, product analysts, product managers, product release train managers. They're managers. You want a budget? Call it a product. That's the extreme example. But in my conversations with many European companies, some in Spain and all over Europe, I've noticed a feeling among people that something is missing. They have very strong technical practices, so delivery is not the problem. Embedded designers, they've got passionate product managers, but something is missing. So funny story, I did a workshop for a big company in Europe, and half the room, when I checked with them, said, we kind of do this already. And then the other half of the room said privately to me, I don't think we do this already. And the leaders were saying, yep, we're doing this. And the contributors on the team were saying, we're not doing this. So there's a mismatch, right? Something is missing. Now, what I hear from some other people is maybe there's a lack of product management knowledge, some people say. No, there is not, at least from what I can see. You can find very qualified product managers in Europe, thoughtful and eager, awareness of different practices, lots of overlap, experiences working in other parts of the world. They have senior product leaders, so I don't think it's that. I'm hearing a garbage truck come, so hopefully it won't be too loud. So this question has been with me for a long time now. Why? What is missing? Because I hear from these companies, we're doing everything right, but we're not seeing the outcomes. And this is part of the reason why I put this talk together. So about a year ago, I shared this diagram and I've received lots of feedback. And I wanted to explain first what my goal was. So first, I wanted to have fun. I love playing with models like this. I wanted to explore team boundaries and decision boundaries. I wanted to explore handoffs. I wanted to think about internal handoffs and then team member to team member handoffs, external handoffs. And very importantly, I didn't want to create a maturity model, right? Or model the whole company. But I think that this diagram still holds. I still think it's a helpful experiment. And so here are the stages that I came up with. First, at the top, you have what would normally be called waterfall. And it's a completely siloed organization. You have different groups responsible for opportunity selection, requirements, planning, design, build, test, release, and run. And there's a handoff, that gray arrow between each activity. And next we have a team boundary form in the second row with the build passing the work to the testers on the team. There's still a handoff, but they're on the team together. And then the team hands off the work to the people who release and run the software. Okay, next. You see where this is going. The team boundary expands at this moment. Now the team owns releasing what they build, and then building and testing is a loop. So maybe we call this agile with release. And now the designer's favorite, a designer joins the team, and the design hands off work to the build, the test, and the release loop. But again, they're a new team member. They're embedded designer. So keep in mind, though, this whole time someone else is running. Which brings us then to the DevOps side, right, where suddenly the run comes under the team's responsibility. And then my favorite, we jump down to this particular thing, that's the DevOps thing, and we jump down to this row. Keep in mind the whole time the team has been handed requirements, and this changes as the team starts to take responsibility for figuring out requirements. So maybe a product owner is on the team, and once they figure out the requirements, they get handed off to design, build, test, run, etc. And so I call this the feature factory. The team has a product manager, they have a designer, they have engineers, but they're still taking opportunities from elsewhere. Okay, one of our favorites. Now we get the mini CEO product manager joins the team, the consultant from McKinsey, right? Before, the team wasn't very involved in opportunity selection. So this is the classic model when a business savvy product manager joins the team, but they may not have spent the time working on teams as a designer engineer. They really do see themselves as the grand strategy setter, the mini CEO. And then finally, you have a truly entrepreneurial cross-functional team with all the components falling under every team member's responsibility, a big loop. Developer might propose an opportunity, an engineer might propose one, and together the team decides if this is the right direction. So I'm sure that you're seeing the patterns here. We see increased collaboration, and then we see the decision boundaries. We see the fading of silos, both internally and externally on the teams. The boundary is increasing. The team gets more responsibility. And also with every step, you get some new tensions, which we'll talk about. So what can you learn from this model? And what have I learned when talking to teams about it? Well, first of all, product is difficult. It is discontinuous. It is non-linear. You have starts and stops. You reach one level, you get comfortable, then you have challenges. And in a company, you might even have teams working at many of these levels. So with each shift, the role of product manager changes. In fact, the product manager that's successful in one stage may not be successful in the next. And let me explain. So for example, a product manager focused on processing requirements may have a lot of trouble with getting their teams to commit to a strategy, the next step. And the person used to handling a team strategy may have trouble engaging them in the strategy and bringing them in. And finally, what you do see is the allure of the feature factory and the mini CEO models. So for many companies, that's a big step up, but it's not the end state. So a big takeaway for me is that there's actually more to the left and to the right. And for an organization to be truly product-led, it extends up and out all the way to the core strategy of the company. It extends the organizational structure. And at a certain point, the whole company becomes the product. Now, for many companies, what I just shared represents a journey. So you have to ask, where are we at? What are our needs? But with that model in mind, I'm going to share 4 patterns that organizations find themselves experiencing while taking this journey. The first is the shifting needs as the organization improves. The second is how organizational structure impacts the journey. The third is this shift to breaking the barriers down between different teams internally. And the fourth is this idea of learning as fast as you ship. Okay, let's jump in. A little bit of water. So this is one of my favorite patterns, and it's the first pattern. And this happens when someone says you need strong product management, and then you don't. So let me explain this one in more depth because I think it's very interesting. So I'll start with a story. I met with a company that had no product management function. There was a couple years, things were chaotic, no strategy, a complete lack of focus. And then after a couple bad situations, they finally found that strong product management leader who could turn things around. They hired that person. And the new leader was an advocate for product thinking for strategy. But the situation slowly changed. The engineers and designers were quickly up-leveling their product skills. They wanted to have more say. They were more eager to see the impact of their work. At Amplitude, we see a lot of the main drivers for analytics are actually designers and engineers who want to see the impact of their work. That's something to think about. They wanted to be more involved in defining the strategy. And maybe most importantly, they wanted to take more ownership and more accountability. Just building the right thing right was not enough for those teams. So the problem was that the commanding product management style that took them to that point had stopped working. And working in new ways required new forms of partnership, new forms of collaboration, more humility. Stepping back, it required new incentives, especially for the members of the product management team. So why is this important? This is important because there's no destination. The role of product leadership is to up-level the whole organization. And in this case, that once you start making progress, the question is, can the team go from rock stars and mini CEOs to team participants, from strong product leaders to enabling product leadership? And that's one of the patterns, one of the key patterns that I've noticed. So how do you know you're having this problem if you're in your organization? So what you'll see is you'll see engineers pushing back and designers pushing back. They might seem disconnected or discouraged. And the team becomes more opinionated. So keep on the lookout for that if you see those signals. So the second pattern is what I call the fractal nature of product leadership and teams, and it's very interesting. So let's consider the ideal world of a digital product startup. An engineer meets a designer, meets a product manager. Together, they start a business. This reminds me of our band discussion just recently with Arnie and Todd. So they work alongside each other. They grow the business. They become amazing partners to marketing and sales. The product is amazing. And then as the team scales, they encourage partnership across all levels of the company. In a sense, every little team becomes its own mini startup, almost like the founding team. And everyone lives happily ever after. Okay. But let's go back to the real world. For most companies. So in the real world, or another reality, leaders may not have developed products, especially together. Maybe the founding team was only engineers or only sales or only marketing. Maybe they've always viewed product development as a delivery function, or maybe they have no experience with design and technology in the sense of creating these step changes and outcomes. They haven't seen it. So in many cases, what we actually observe is the following. The leadership team is relatively cross-functional, as much as they can be. The teams are cross-functional, because that's what you're told to do, but the managers, the middle management does not collaborate. They do not model that original behavior that we talked about with the founders in that ideal example. So they manage for functional incentives, even though the top is cross-functional and even though the teams are cross-functional, which leaves, teams, it's like the teams are actually more made up of 3 particular teams when they're working on it. So when you've got these teams made up of 3 teams, it doesn't function like a full team. So how can you tell this is happening? You have to ask managers, of course. And the question is how much time do you actually spend collaborating with your peer managers? Design manager and product manager. Would you be comfortable forming a team if you had to with those people? How do you incentivize your direct reports? Do you incentivize them by whatever your department says to incentivize them from, or by the goals the team set for themselves? Okay, why is this important for you in product-led journey? For many companies, being product-led is only at the frontline team level and aspirationally at the leadership level, but there's a gap in understanding. So in reality, the structure of the organization is not conducive to being a truly product-led company. Maybe product overwhelms engineering and design, or engineering overwhelms product or design, or as we know, marketing and sales overwhelms everyone. And the whole thing is out of balance. So the key takeaway for this pattern is that it is not enough to have product teams and product managers. And this is where I think many companies get confused. They've done the right things, but that effort is not mirrored up and down the organization. So look, a product leader is not enough. If that person is a team of 1 trying to fight the CEO or the CFO or the CRO or the SMO, what was I think? Oh, maybe I forgot it. Chief Marketing Officer. So this is the second pattern here, this idea of how the org chart. Okay. Next, we have this dichotomy between customer-facing and non-customer-facing teams, and I see this a lot. So our instinct is to elevate product teams as a first-class citizen, and this creates a second class in the organization, the non-customer-facing teams. They have the shadow roadmaps, the backlog. So, the customer-facing teams are seen as the revenue center, and these other teams are seen as the cost center. And actually what you notice is there's resentment and increase in technical debt, and bad things happen. So many of these shadow teams have no contact with the customers out in the world. They have no product manager. In short, there's a big disconnect. So why is this so important in this product-led journey? What's the infrastructure team have anything to do with it? Everything we do contributes to our organization's ability to create value. So if development slows to a halt, there's nothing more important to fix. And if we only focus on the shiny objects, the stuff that goes out to customers, all the weeds start to grow. That famous thing is, we'll do a tech debt month. That will never save you. You will never save your company with a tech debt month, I promise. So what product-led companies have understood is that it's all the product, the tools, the infrastructure, the support teams. To be able to innovate sustainably, you need to break down these barriers. Anyone can ship quickly for a couple quarters these days, or even a year or 2, but the cracks will form. They will begin to show, and you'll have trouble scaling your product efforts gracefully. And you'll probably lose some of your best designers and engineers if you do that. Here's a crazy example. Real company. The work used to take 15 to 30 days. The exact same reference type of work took 150 to 300 days. And you know what product leadership said? Product leadership said, I think we can dedicate 10% of our debt work down efforts. Sorry, my screen just fell down, which is crazy. To that. So think about that. Everything's gotten 10x slower, and then they're going to dedicate 10% of their effort to try to work down the debt. How crazy is that? Right? This idea that should be only given that small percentage of capacity to do that. So as product leaders, we have to offer our support and advocacy for those teams that are 1 or 2 steps removed from what we think of when we think about product teams. And with this, I'm going to present the final pattern as a question. Are you shipping faster than you learn or learning faster than you ship? So I asked 800 people reply to a survey that I did recently. And Pareto principle, 80% said their organizations were shipping faster than they could learn. Increasingly, fast delivery is not a differentiator. It is just table stakes. You and your competitors are all shipping quickly. So I will describe this with a funny short story. I was chatting with the team and they said something crazy to me. They said, we know something's working when we work longer on it, not shorter. And this was causing incredible problems in the way that the engineering team was measuring throughput. You know, the Jira dashboards were going crazy. What's wrong with this team? And the reality is they were right. They were learning quickly enough and responding fast enough that they could spend longer on certain missions. That, in my mind, is the real, like, that's a signal of being product-led, an alignment of incentives. So this is a pendulum in many organizations. You'll find these periods of learning followed by periods of executing. And after executing, of course, there's a lot of debt in what you've learned. Then you return to learning. The real problem that I notice is that if you take this to the extreme, there is so much complexity that shipping becomes impossible. And of course, then you can't ship as fast as you learn. And this can be very difficult to escape from. So why is this important? As we progress along this product-led journey, what we call learning becomes broader and broader. What we shoot for at Amplitude are these like entrepreneurial learning teams right down there at the bottom of this particular chart. But up near the top, there's learning everywhere. Maybe for one team, learning is figuring out if any customers use what they work at all. Yes or no, just one use. And for another team, learning about things could be about learning about the whole strategy of the company, sitting with the CFO and the CEO and figuring out the strategy. So as we go down these stages, who is empowered to learn changes and the ability for the teams to influence the strategy changes. So let's recap the talk so far. I started by describing these myths of being product-led. We're talking about design and technology here as the catalyst for sustainable growth. We used this simplified model that I showed you to describe the product-led journey, and I described 4 patterns you notice in companies making this journey. 1, when strong product leadership needs to shift to enabling product leadership. Pattern number 2, this idea of the geometric nature of the product teams extending up and down through the middle management of the company. Pattern number 3, this dichotomy between customer-facing and non-customer-facing teams. Product leadership needs to address that. They can't make the problem worse. And pattern number 4 is the ability to learn as fast as you ship. And with that, I wanted to extend my model a little bit. I mentioned that I thought it was limited. So let's just think about it for a second. So what you notice in the model is that product thinking is spreading throughout the organization. You begin to see the alignment of incentives. They match our aspirations. The silos between departments fades away. The company becomes the product. And design and technology are increasingly seen as a way to create sustainable growth for the company. And the one way you could think of that is that the boundaries between the company strategy and product strategy fade. Or like I say, before it's, can I get a seat at the table? And a product-led company redesigns the table to sit at. They don't accept the other table. They redesign it to be a way to guide the company. So I wanted to leave you with a couple tips. These are high level, but I think that this is worth saying. The first is you have to be patient. And I talked to hundreds of teams, and especially, alongside this thing with COVID, is that sometimes it takes something massive outside to move things along. Sometimes nothing will change for years and then suddenly it does. So you have to put the pieces in place methodically and then set yourself up for success. And that's what defined the companies that were able to emerge stronger from COVID. And the second, there's this element of letting go. For your organization to make this big leap, you need product thinking everywhere. You will need to stop being the smartest person in the room. We see this a lot with Amplitude. It's that designer who goes in and said, our strategy's off. You can't be the smartest person in the room. You'll need to empower designers and engineers to give them access to insights, to discover opportunities, to innovate. Next one, if you are a manager, you have to start modeling the cross-functional collaboration for the teams that report to you, and then to model that to higher parts of the company. Next, I wrote this book about this North Star framework thing. You can check it out at Amplitude or Google it and find North Star framework, but other approaches will do. So make sure that everyone, the non-customer facing teams especially, can map their work to the customers in the world. I gave you that example that any team that could bring it back to 15 to 30 days would be the most valuable team at the company at the moment. And finally, keep thinking how you can explore these step changes, where you can really bring design and technology to the table. So in summary, patience, letting go, encourage middle management to collaborate, make strategy explicit, and explore the step changes. So with that, I will say thank you, and then hopefully answer a couple questions. If I didn't go too long, hopefully I did this within time to do that. So I'll press stop sharing now, if I can find that. To do that. So I'll press stop sharing now, if I can find that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, John, for this such an inspiring talk and all those tips that you could share with us. There is a few questions, so let's use the 5-10 minutes that we have left, starting with the first question from Miguel. Hi, John. I recently joined a brick and mortar company to lead this journey to product. But all the old style management guys don't even want to collaborate with me. Where should I start?
Yeah, that's a good one. And so the first thing you need to start is that every human being, most of us only believe things when we see it. To be honest, I mean, with like, maybe we're scientists, and so we believe some part of science. We don't believe in scientists in the United States, but maybe in the rest of the world, they believe in science. But you have to show, not tell. And one thing I've learned in my own career is that you're talking to a very experienced leader of a company who's done this for a really long time and has built their life and their expertise in a certain area. The last thing, the worst thing you can do is to assume that you can sort of bring this messy world. I mean, look, in product teams, doing nothing is sometimes the most valuable thing you can be doing. You could go the whole day and an engineer and developer would be sitting and just looking at a whiteboard, and then they walk to their machine and type 3 things, and it's the most valuable thing they did. Now, you think about that leader of that company, in the brick and mortar company, walking by and being like, they're still by the whiteboard. When are they going to start typing again? They got to start typing again, because that's how they think about progress. And so the first thing is you need to create small experiments where you can show them. And sometimes that could be like as simple as a usability test, or it could be as simple as carving out one part of your product where you can, put some, we get a lot of success about this at Amplitude with analytics. It's like one team takes that initiative, and even just to be able to say to the organization, you thought everyone was using it, but they use it and stop using it. Just something that basic to do it. So that would be the advice that I would give is don't try the rational approach. Another thing about the rational approach is we all love to solve our own problems. So you imagine you're the leader of that company, and this person comes and says, you're wrong. You just need to do this thing that I read in this book called Build Trap or whatever. And I've got this. Like, the leader wants to solve their own problems too. So you're forcing it on people. So the best thing is to show, not tell. Just find an example, find a part of the business that you can create some momentum, and then show it to people. Okay. That's my experience, at least.
Okay, cool. And as you said before, maybe you're really finding success with those old style management and professionals. Yeah.
One note about that is, don't forget that these people are crazy savvy in business. You don't become the CEO or the leader of a particular company because you don't know anything about business, right? So part of it is also speaking the language of business to them and not trying to speak the language of just working in different ways. So try to connect with them about the business picture as well.
And do you think that most product managers knows how to well speak business with all?
Yeah, that's, what's interesting about it is I think they understand a circle of business, but if you put them in front of, especially in that particular style of company, when you take it out of the digital product realm and talk about like how a normal balance sheet looks like and how things are accounted for, A lot of them don't. So that's something to think about. My favorite advice is just take the person, the chief, the CFO, like out to lunch.
Okay.
And some of those connections are the biggest things you can do in the company. CFOs want to make money, and when they talk to you, they learn something new, and you can learn a lot from them by chatting with them.
Okay, cool, interesting. Next question: how could we help as product managers, our leaders, to understand that there is a real gap between their vision and the day-to-day of the team, and really prevent this situation? Because at the end, they are destroying their own company and burning their own cash. So what's your main advice, and maybe something that you can brought based on your experiences before?
Yeah, again, I think this is very related to the just question we just talked about, where it's that. So here's the problem: the worse the business is doing, the more reactive everyone is getting, and the bigger of a strategy they want, and the bigger of a solution they want, and a bigger of a silver bullet they want, and more answers. They don't want any uncertainty. The harder things get, the more certainty people want, and the more sort of reactive and less open they are to new information. So first thing is acknowledging that. So if your business truly is in trouble, you have to realize that everyone's tension level will be pretty high. So you need to be pretty graceful with how you present these things. Yeah. And I think that really for a lot of product folks, I think that a lot of this is around painting a picture for them about how you could create a step change in growth and kind of change the trajectory of the company in a way that's persuasive. So I think it's like the similar question. I mean, this is about product management, is about communication and persuasion in many ways, and influence. And I think that that's kind of the key. You need to paint the picture for them about how what you're doing could do it. And one thing that is also important is to get right down to the part of the business model that is changing everything. So an example of a company that, for example, they maybe bought by a private equity firm, and the private equity firm is assuming all these efficiencies exist, and no one knows if they exist. Like, you need to tap into that central business motion at the moment and talk that language. Because if you're off there talking about like, oh, our lifetime value of our customers is down by 5%, and then meanwhile there's a big massive change in the industry, and all you're doing is talking about that thing, you're going to miss the boat. So you need to find that core nugget, that core motion that the business is worried about, and then just try to talk that language. I don't know if that helps. That's the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, nice. There were another interesting question about is it really possible to be product-led as a company and apply all this thinking and way of working that you described during the talk, when the entire team is all junior people studying in product sphere and with no previous background dealing with stakeholders and with negotiations?
Yeah, so that's you've just hit the nail on the head. Like, I worked at a company here in Santa Barbara that could take a 22-year-old new graduate and make them a really successful product developer in 2 years. And in 24 months, right? And so the problem is, once you mention that stakeholder management word, right? Like, once you manage these very deep, messy people skills and navigating a really busy organization. So this is what I see a lot. Someone says, I can't hire any senior product managers. Oh my goodness, I can't find any. And then I say, well, how much time did you have time to mentor the last people you had? Oh, I don't have any time. I'm spending all my time trying to manage the CEO. They're a wreck. And it's like, look, you don't need that. You think you need that senior product manager, but you need to fix your calendar. Like, there are more important things here. So like Arnie is a good example, or folks we just talked to, like, they nurture their team. They grow these teams where people stay for, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to stay in that place. So I think that the real answer to this question is, you do not need a lot of senior people on a product management org or an overall product development org to get amazing things out of people. And if you think that you only need the most experienced people, there's probably another problem that you need to solve.
Okay. Got it. Last question. Is there any great resources you could point out for any product folks here today working on Spanish companies, looking just to read interesting stuff and make their mind a bit more informed about this whole product journey and transformation? What would be podcast?
Yeah, I can give people like a cross section of books, like not to plug my own. I mean, I think the book we wrote about this North Star framework book is actually a really good introduction to a lot of these ideas. So it's short, so I would recommend that. The second thing is that there's a really good book called How to Measure Anything, Intangibles in Business. And I find myself recommending it a couple times a week. And it really gives you down to the heart of what measurement is about and why you measure and what you're trying to do. So that will help, a person trying to learn to do these things. I think that learning more about strategy is important. There is a really good book on Medium written by someone called Simon Wardley, who has this visual style of describing strategy. And I think I found that to be very accessible for new people trying to learn. And so I would read that book. It's again, it's not like a massive book. It might be 20,000 words or something like that. But I think that a couple of those resources, Melissa Perry's book about the build trap is helpful. And then finally, I would say the book Crucial Conversations, because Crucial Conversations is really, at the end of the day, you need to master communication. I probably burned years of my career not realizing that communication and kind of getting clear with yourself do that. The final book is a book called Getting to Yes with Yourself. And it's a good complement to, it's Getting to Yes is a famous negotiation book, but he wrote a book called Getting to Yes with Yourself. And I think it's the ultimate book to kind of teach negotiation by starting with what your needs are. So Crucial Conversations and Getting to Yes with Yourself are like power resources, I think, for product managers to focus on the communication side.
Cool. Thanks a lot for those great resources and advices. That's already over. So John,
great. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a crazy year, and I was so excited to travel. And whatever. We're gonna make this happen.
We're gonna make this happen. No worries. We'll have you another time on Madrid. So no worries. Just mentioning that for the folks that maybe didn't see that or read that on your LinkedIn or Twitter, you were about to release a book a few months ago, and you took this very hard decision to postpone the book. So we are really looking forward this. We'll receive a huge interest from the product community. I think that you're already showing how it's important when you reach that kind of seniority to share this knowledge and help more junior and more new people in this product sphere. So thanks a lot for sharing that much on Twitter. That's incredible. I don't even know how you to manage to have this Twitter and all.
I have to. I mean, an admission here. Like my son had some health problems for about 2 years, so we didn't sleep for 2 years, basically. And then COVID hit, and then we had a 2-year-old inside our house for 7 months. So the answer to how the Twitter thing happens is just an incredible amount of sleep deprivation. So if it's ever in the morning in Spain and you see the crazy tweet with the drawing, it's probably me just like trying to get 2 bits of work done while the baby's sleeping. So that's the story. Anyway.
Okay. So now maybe a bit more of focus and again,
more sleep, and then the good ideas will come to do that. That's my advice to all product managers: just sleep. You'll be good.
Just sleep. Yeah, that's a good point. Staying by that. Thanks again, John, for
cool. My pleasure. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Okay, talk to you soon.
In Spain. Bye.
Bye.